Greetings to the summit participants. Allow me to present the report Distance Lexicographic Discourse of Terminological Schools, Platforms of Communicational Interaction. My assistant, Daria Ivashchenko, will help me as I am not so fluent in English. I give her the word.
Greetings to all the present. I have the honor to present our report. So let us begin. The challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic have changed the usual discursive formats. The tendency to distance representatives not only of different language communities, but also within one language society is now highlighted in scientific communication. Given the global digitalization of educational and scientific space, we observe the dominance of remote and distance forms of work requiring the transformation or search for new platforms for communicational interaction of scientists. Modern lexicographers did not avoid this process either. Today, they also remote themselves in their work, thus giving grounds to intensify the concept of distance lexicographic discourse. It is based on the use of the latest information and communication technologies being rapidly developed. Distance discourse is sometimes identified with internet discourse or computer discourse, which, in our opinion, needs clarification and analysis. In our study, we define distance discourse as a discourse that unfolds through electronic communication channels that separate the subject of communication without face-to-face contact of users in real time and space, which means internet discourse and computer discourse can be different. It correlates with the remote discourse, the discourse unfolding via electronic communication channels that distinguish communication subject deprived of direct real interaction in real time and space, but with elements of control. So, despite the large number of works in issues of theory and practice of creating dictionaries, the very concept of lexicographic discourse today has not found proper testing in scientific circles. The discourse, in contrast to the text, is considered in the dynamics with the presence of communicators. Lexicographic discourse is proposed to be studied by the parameters common to other discourses, as you may see on the slide. We believe that for the study of lexicographic discourse, especially in distance format, one should consider first, the subject of communication is the dictionary and a macrotext being a collection of its microtexts, for example, dictionary articles, in the dynamics of today. Second, participants of communicational interaction. For the distance format, this is presented on the slide. Third, means of communication, semiotic codes through which international information is transmitted between the subject of communicational interactions like words, pictures, graphics, etc. In distance lexicographic discourse, it is possible to create e-dictionaries of different types: text, symbolic, visual, sound, audio, combined ones. Such dictionaries, in contrast to traditional ones, can also be multimedia, audiovisual, with audio clips, animated fragments, digital video, hypertext, hypermedia, hypertext, and multimedia. Fourth, channels of communicational interactions, emails, telephone, radio, television, internet, etc., which in distance lexicographic discourse between communicators is transmitted. Either a message about the dictionary and its elements, or the dictionary itself as the message, macrotext. In this discourse, a dictionary, in particular an electronic one, online network, can also be a channel of communication, which in fact makes a platform by itself for communicational interaction, especially when it comes to open source dictionaries or free access dictionaries, which are interactive resources. Fifth, vectors of communicational interactions or discursive vectors, which have their own specifics in relation to traditional and computer electronic lexicography. For example, the correlation of two main discursive vectors for traditional and computer or electronic lexicography. You may see the slides. There can be many such vectors. Status orientation. You may also see examples on this slide. A representative of this discourse in all its diversity of vectors is, for example, the online discussion web platform Lexmeet, founded by the European lexicographic infrastructure. The subject of communicational interaction in terminographic discourse is the problem of compiling terminological dictionaries, branch encyclopedias, creation of terminological and/or terminographic databases, and terminology management system, as well as repositories of terminological dictionaries. In terminological discourse, according to different platforms of communicational interaction, in particular in a distance format, we distinguish. One, by analogy with lexicographic discourse, dictionary discourse, and dictionary article discourse. One of the examples of identifying such potential, in our opinion, can be especially created for educational purposes online tool for initial assessment of terminological dictionaries, term test, dictionary self-assessment test on the web portal of the Terminologist Center TermCat. Two, the discursive potential of the term or terminological discourse in correlation with the discourse of the terminological management, given the problem of unification, normalization, standardization, and harmonization of the term, and especially in terms of finding interlanguage equivalents. Examples of such a correlation are specially designed communicational interaction platforms for building dictionary writing systems as terminology management tools that update the vector user creator, user editor, user administrator, user configurator, user reader in particular. One, multi-term from RWS, which ensures consistency of terminology for all content types and all languages. Two, Terminolog, web-based platform with an open access as a tool for building, managing, and publishing term bases. The software is developed and maintained by Dublin City University. It allows access to different users: reader, editor, creator, administrator, configurator. Three, discursive potential of the terminological dictionary as a terminographic product, which is a large text message, actually terminological discourse. An example of identifying such potential is the multilingual term-in terminographic database, open access on the website of the Terminology Commission under the International Committee of Slavonic Scholars. The user interface of which is developed in English and 10 Slavic languages. The database is a platform for distant communicational interaction on the vector user compiler, user editor, user reader. Terminographic discourse, actually terminographic and terminological, is distinguished from the lexicographic discourse of terminological schools, represented the communicational interaction on the vector user terminographer, user terminologist, user terminographer, user terminologist. Lexicographic discourse of terminological schools is one of the types of status-oriented, which means institutional, scientific discourse between representatives of a social groups of terminologists and or terminographers. Within this kind of discourse, we distinguish: one, monolingual cultural discourse, national level of communicational interaction of terminological schools, is a discourse that represents communication between representatives of different research areas, including terminological school of one language community. An example of such a discourse, particularly in Ukraine, is the Ukrainian Dictionaries Forum. Two, polylingual cultural discourse, international level of communicational interaction of terminological schools, is a discourse that represents communication between lexicographers, terminographers, and lexicologists, terminologists, being speakers of different language, at the same time representatives of different language communities. This discourse has its varieties, like Discourse of community leaders, focused on communication in professional social networks like ResearchGate, LinkedIn, etc., as you may see on the slide. Interinstitutional discourse. An example of such a lexicographic discourse of terminological schools is the distance format in the communication platform on the YourTerm.org website, or the Terminology Without Borders project founded by Terminology Coordination Unit of the Directorate General for Translation of the European Parliament. Institutional discourse. It has participants who have specific roles and a deployment template within certain limits. The example of such a discourse is the creation of the multilingual glossary of terminology terms as one of types of activities of the Terminology Commission under International Committee of Slavonic Scholars. The creation of dictionaries had a methodology prescribed in a certain sequence as a fixed order, which falls under a certain pattern depending on the type of dictionary. However, it may change. This is a deployment of lexicographic microdiscourse of terminological schools or lexicographic discourse of terminological schools in the format of closed group of participants in indirect communicational interaction due to the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. This discourse at this stage of its development is classified as remote discourse. In fact, the correlation of the proposed dictionary and direct work on it is the subject of communicational interaction between project participants, 20 terminologists from 10 Slavic countries. It's a working microgroup. Such communication forms the core of the discourse. Here are examples of individual fragments and subdiscourses of the development of this kind of international discourse. Subdiscourse 1, deployment of dictionary discourse and discourse of the dictionary article. According to the methodological template, it correlates with the stage of development, the concept of the dictionary, definition of its typological variety, format, and writing of the instruction. We give an example of one of the fragments of indirect communicational interaction within the working group, which begins with a discussion of the macro and micro structure of the dictionary in discussions between representatives. 1. Traditional theory, system structural, normocentric. Terminology, proposals for the creation of a dictionary of system type, in particular structured by levels of hierarchical organization of terminological units. Cognitive, communicational, cognitive, functional, and linguoculturological approach in terminology, proposals to present in the dictionary article the most complete information nature of each of them, the specifics of its functioning and scientific text in accordance with the language original definitions, quotations in 10 languages. And 3, a linguistic technological computer approach for web-based online terminology management, proposals to immediately form an electronic database. In order to find common solutions, the following technologies were used. Technology of discussing the problem in online meeting. Technology of the creation of a common platform for mutual understanding, like mailing among team members aimed at explaining and justifying discussion position. One of the rules of decision-making was applied, which is responsible person decides after discussion, which prompted the use of another. Thus, the decisions were made in the theoretical and in the practical aspect. Institutional discourse of multilingual glossary of terminology terms deploys also terminological subdiscourse too. This subdiscourse correlates with the subdiscourse of the dictionary article, which according to the methodological template corresponds to first to the procedure of step-by-step formation of the consolidated register with parallel definition of criteria for selecting terminological units and then stage compilation of the dictionary. There is example of one fragment of indirect communicational interaction of the compilers of the dictionary within the working group, in particular the discussion of the definitions of the concept compound term. Position 1 and position 2 are seen on the slide. So, terminological discourse and terminology schools discourse itself in a multilingual dictionary is also supported by element of the dictionary article note as one of the ways to introduce the explanations on the specifics of the established use of the term and its semantic context is professional communication of representatives of a particular language society, scientific field, or terminological school. Regarding possible culturally labeled information, such a comment helps to model a dictionary article in order to show the conceptual ambiguity of the same term in its interpretation by representatives of different language cultures, fields, and schools in terminology. The actual working process of compiling a dictionary on the vector of communicational interaction, please see the slide. Radical changes in the work of scientists caused by the development of innovative technological systems, introduction of high-tech schemes for the formation of informational base of open science at a paradigm of open innovation and a single European research area, encouraged the development of concepts and creation of the basis of the multilingual glossary of terminology terms of the open virtual terminographic laboratory. So the conclusion, thus today there is no unambiguous understanding of the term distance discourse and remote discourse. The concept of lexicographic, terminographic, and terminological discourses, the discourse of terminological management, and the discourse of terminological schools require further elaboration. Due to a new paradigm of open innovation in its time to develop as platform times for communicational interaction between representatives of various scientific communities and in this context also experts in the field of terminology. The lexicographic discourse of terminological schools is quite diverse. It is formed by various sub-discourses, the study of which requires a separate research. Not all dictionaries represent such a discourse. Mostly, there are multilingual lexicographical works compiled by representatives of different language communities and scientific schools in close cooperation. Such dictionaries are specific platforms for communicational interaction, regardless of paper or electronic formats. However, today's challenges and requests instigate terminology professionals to create more open source e-versions. The concept of such a platform on the basis of the glossary of terminology terms being able to become a virtual laboratory for cooperation of terminographers and terminologists of different countries awaits for its development. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.